Hello, in this video I'd like to go over how you go about installing and configuring Indexer as a service. So if you already have GX4 up and running and you're currently running WS Index, the Indexer console as your desktop application indexer, and now you want to switch to Indexer as a service, I'm going to go over that process on how you do that. Now first, before you get into doing this, we recommend that you run WD Update and update yourself to the latest code release, and also that way you get the latest installer for Indexer as a service. I have a separate video in our admin video series on how you run WD Update and when that should be done. So you go ahead and review that if you're not familiar with the WD Update process. But once you have your system up to date and now you're ready to install Indexer as a service, first thing we need to do is shut down our current desktop indexer. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop and close that. And now that I see that both my resources that I'm indexing are stopped, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of WS Index and close the Indexer console down. Now, one thing I want to bring up about Indexer as a service is you cannot run it on the same server that your WorldDocs program and documents are installed on. You do need a separate Indexer PC. So I know we do have some smaller sites out there where tech support will let them run the desktop indexer on the same server as their documents as long as they have 5 licenses or less of WorldDocs. But once you get beyond that, you're required to have a separate Indexer PC. For Indexer as a service, it doesn't matter how many users you have, even if you have less than 5, it has to be installed on a separate dedicated Indexer PC. So just make sure you've got that up and running. Now we need some prep work before we actually install Indexer as a service. The first thing is you need to make sure you have the WorldDocs client installed on the Indexer PC. You don't have to have it running all the time, but you do need it installed. If it's not currently installed on your Indexer PC, just navigate to your network WorldDocs folder and look for your wdmirror.exe file and just start it and run it. That'll create your C WorldDocs folder and populate it with all the files. You don't have to do it like you're doing a client install on a user's PC where you pass them the /i. Because we're not going to want it to create all the shortcuts. We're just going to need one shortcut for the client on the Indexer PC, and that's right on the desktop. So, and I've got that here. So I've already installed the WorldDocs client on this before, and I have a shortcut to start the client. And if I look at the properties of that, it starts the wdmirror.exe from the C WorldDocs folder. Now, if you do already have it installed, or you just ran the WD Mirror and you've exited out, go ahead and run it from the C WorldDocs folder just once to make sure the rest of the setup gets done. Also, if you already had the WorldDocs client installed on this PC, but you haven't run it in a long time, you want to run this to make sure you get the right code patch applied so you've got the same code on the local C drive as you do up on the network WorldDocs copy. And then once you do that, go ahead and just exit out and shut down the WorldDocs client. You don't need to keep that running. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to add that C WorldDocs folder to the very beginning of your path statement on the Indexer PC. Otherwise the service will not be able to find the required DLLs and other supporting files in order for the service to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go down to this search line, and if I just start typing in environment, you'll see edit the system environment variables. Just click on this. That's one way to get to it. And then click on your environment variables button. We're not going to edit the path up here. This is for your user variables, and this path gets tacked on to the end of the system path. And if your system path is really long and this gets tacked on to the end, we may not see, the Indexer as a service may not see WorldDocs in the path, because Microsoft is going to truncate that off to just the first 256 characters of the path. If it is at the end beyond that length, it's not going to do any good. So we're going to go ahead and go to the system variables path and click on edit, click on the new button, and then we're going to type in C:\WorldDocs and hit enter to add that. Now we need to move this up to the top. So with it highlighted, just click on the move up button and then click OK. Click OK, and then we can click OK here. Now, just to verify that it's there, I'm going to right-click on my Start button and go to Run. I'll type in CMD to get out to a command prompt, and then I'm just going to type in the word path and hit Enter. And see where I see cWorldDocs is right in the beginning of the path, so I know it's there, so the service is going to be able to find it and find all the required files when the service is running. One other thing you need to check for is, right now I'm using Windows 10 as my dedicated indexer PC. If you happen to have set up your dedicated indexer PC with a server-based OS, you also need to make sure on that indexer PC running that server-based OS that you make your indexer login account a local admin of that PC. Otherwise, the service is not going to have enough permissions and the service isn't going to run. So just make sure that if you're running a server-based OS for your indexer PC, that you also make your indexer account a member, so it's a local admin on that indexer PC, or the service is going to have problems starting and running. Okay, so we've done all the prep work. Now we have to install Indexer as a service. And where you get the installer from is you go to your Network WorldDocs folder, and then you're going to see a subfolder called IaaS for Indexer as a Service. I'm going to open this up, and this has the documentation along with the MSI. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this MSI to the desktop of the Indexer PC, and I'm going to run it from there. So once I've copied it, now I'm just going to double click on it. I'm going to accept the terms in the license agreement. Take the default install location. What it's going to do is it's going to create a WDX SVC folder under your cWorldDocs folder and install it there. Do not browse and put it somewhere else. If you put it somewhere else, it's not going to work. You need to take the default location. Then click Next. Now it wants to know where's your network WorldDocs installed. If you're a drive letter based system, put the drive letter path in there. If you're UNC based, put the full UNC path. So mine happens to be installed under the W drive, under WApps WorldDocs, and I'm just going to click Next and then Install. Now, if you need this additional install, just for these DLLs, just agree to the license terms and then run the install on that. Then I'll get some additional DLLs installed that the service needs. Okay, so now it's installed. We're done with this MSI. I can just drag and drop this into the recycle bin and get rid of it. And notice it created some shortcuts. One for the service installer, one for the indexer console, and one for updating the WorldDocs service installer. Now you may already have a shortcut to start the indexer console. Maybe you added some parameters to it, so when it starts up, it automatically starts indexing certain drive letters. You can go ahead and get rid of this shortcut because you're going to have the same shortcut here without those parameters on there. So it's just, we can go ahead and get rid of it or just edit it and remove those additional parameters. Now the next thing we have to do is set up the service. So I'm going to run this WorldDocs service installer. And the first thing I need to do is provide the credentials, the login credentials for my indexer account. So we type in my indexer account and hit Find User. I'll put it in here and hit Check Names. And whatever it finds, what I want to do is hit OK and let it return. See how the syntax changed from me just typing in WD index versus the way it returned it? Based on how your network's set up, your syntax may look differently. But what you always want to do is use the find user, plug the username in, and let it return the proper syntax, because if you put in the syntax wrong here, the service isn't going to be able to log in correctly. Now I'm going to type in the password. And now the startup type, you always want to select auto start delayed. The reason why you have different choices in here is if tech support needs to connect and they're troubleshooting issues, they may use some of these additional choices. as they're troubleshooting an issue at your site. But for your installation, you always want to choose Auto Start Delayed as the startup type. And now I'm going to click OK. So now at this point, all we've done is added the credentials and the startup type. Now we actually need to install the service on your Indexer PC. And we're going to do that by clicking on this Install Service button and then click OK. This will install the service. Notice it's installed now, but it's stopped. So now we need to start the service. And now the service is started. You see that status has changed to running, but it's not doing anything yet. It's not servicing your production drive letter or your legacy drive or any other resources that you want to index. Now we need to go into WS Index, the indexer console, and tell it what resources we want this service to process. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this, and then I'm going to start my Worldox indexer console. Once it comes up, if for some reason it should come up started because you clicked on the icon that had your old desktop parameters in it or something, then just hit stop to stop them. Then go ahead and click start. And then you're going to have an option here. Before, when you would start it without Indexer as a service, it wouldn't pop up this dialog because the only thing you had was the desktop indexer, and it would just automatically start indexing. Now you have a choice between either the Indexer as a service or the desktop. So we're going to choose the Indexer as a service. It's going to start it up. If I wait a few seconds and then refresh this screen, notice it changed to posting. So at this point now, Indexer as a service knows that it's responsible for my legacy drive and my production UNC share. So it knows that it's responsible for those two things. And every time the indexer gets rebooted, it'll automatically start and start processing these two resources because I told it to via the WS Index console at this initial install point. Now you don't need to leave these open. You can, if I hide this and shut down that window, the service is still running and it's still posting. Of course, because it's running as a service, you can't see what it's doing without using the Indexer console. Now, what you may want to do as the Worldox administrator at the site is create a shortcut on your desktop to start the Worldox Indexer console. And the way you do that is just from your PC, navigate out to your network Worldox folder. In my case, it's my W apps Worldox. And once you're in this folder, look for wsindex.exe and just right click on it and send to desktop create shortcut. That'll put a shortcut on your desktop so that you can start the WS Index indexer console and you can see what is going on with your indexer as a service on your indexer PC. So when I start the Worldox indexer console now and it starts up, it shows me what's posting. So if I just want to see what's going on, I can also start this from my PC. Now we're logged on with the Indexer PC right now on your PC using your account, especially if Active Directory integration is turned on within Worldox. You need to go into WD-admin and make sure that your login account is a member of the WD-Indexer's account in group security. So make sure you're a member of that indexers group in group security, and once you do that, then it'll let you start WS Index from your PC. If you're not a member of that group, it's going to pop up a message when you try and start it saying you're not a member of this group, and that's why it's not letting you start it. But at this point, Indexer as a service is running. You don't need to leave any of the console up and running. It's running as a service. If you should shut down and restart and reboot your Indexer PC, you don't need to log back in when it comes back up, because the service will automatically start once the PC comes back up. So you got that advantage as well. Okay, well, that's what I wanted to cover, is just how you install and get it up and running and have Index as a service running at your location.